Liam Carter stood frozen at the edge of the marble pool, his scrub brush still dripping chlorine water onto expensive Italian tile. Across from him, Aria Bennett had just stepped into the shallow end fully clothed, her silk robe darkening against her skin, her eyes locked on his with an intensity that made his chest tight. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a slip. This was a test, or maybe an invitation, and every instinct in his body screamed two different answers. Behind him, his truck sat in the driveway with a car seat in back and bills stuffed in the glove box. In front of him stood a woman who could ruin everything or change everything, and he had about 10 seconds to decide which kind of man he actually was. If you want to see how a single moment can rewrite a man's entire life, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The alarm went off at 4:30 in the morning, same as always. Liam Carter didn't need it anymore. His body woke itself up 5 minutes before the sound, but he kept it set anyway. Routine mattered. Discipline mattered, especially when you were raising a 6-year-old alone and every single decision had consequences that rippled forward into tomorrow, and next week, and next year. He rolled out of bed quietly, even though Sophie's room was on the other side of their small apartment. The walls were thin, but she slept like a rock, curled up with the stuffed elephant he'd won for her at a county fair 2 summers back. He stood in her doorway for a second, just watching her breathe. Dark hair splayed across the pillow, one arm thrown over her head. She looked exactly like her mother when she slept, and that fact still hit him sideways sometimes, even after 3 years. He pulled the door almost closed and moved to the kitchen. Coffee first. Always coffee. The machine sputtered and hissed, filling the quiet apartment with a smell that felt like the only luxury he allowed himself. While it brewed, he checked his phone. 7 appointments today, 3 regular maintenance calls, 2 first-time cleanings, and 2 quotes for potential new clients. The schedule was full, which meant the bills would get paid. Barely, but paid. He poured the coffee into a metal thermos, grabbed the protein bar he'd left on the counter the night before, and headed for the door. His work truck sat in the apartment complex parking lot looking exactly as tired as he felt. Paint faded, company logo peeling off the side, back loaded with equipment that had seen better years. But the engine started on the first try, and that was enough. The city was still dark when he pulled onto the highway. He liked it this way. Empty roads, no traffic, just him and the hum of the engine and the slow lightening of the sky in his rear-view mirror. He'd been doing this for 6 years now, ever since Sophie was born, and he'd needed something stable, something that didn't require a college degree he didn't have, or connections he'd never made. Pool maintenance wasn't glamorous. It wasn't a career people bragged about. But it was honest work, and it kept food on the table. His first stop was a regular, Mrs. Pacheco, a 72-year-old widow who talked his ear off every single visit, but tipped well and always had fresh lemonade waiting. He spent an hour there, balancing chemicals, skimming leaves, checking the filter. She asked about Sophie, showed him pictures of her grandkids in Arizona, told him the same story about her late husband that she told him every other week. He listened, smiled, nodded in the right places. It was part of the job. By the time he finished his 3rd appointment, the sun was fully up and the day was starting to heat up. Late June in Southern California meant pool season was in full swing, and that meant his phone stayed busy. He ate lunch in his truck between stops, another protein bar, an apple, a bottle of water that had gotten warm sitting in the cup holder. Glamorous. His 4th stop was new, a first-time cleaning at an address in Canyon Heights, one of those neighborhoods where the houses sat behind gates and the driveways were longer than most people's streets. He'd gotten the call 3 days ago from a woman who'd sounded polite but distant on the phone. She needed someone to start weekly maintenance immediately. Previous cleaner had retired. She'd been referred by a neighbor. Standard stuff. He pulled up to the address just after 2 in the afternoon and let out a low whistle. The house was massive. Not mansion level, but close. Modern architecture. All clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows, white stucco and dark wood accents. The kind of place that showed up in design magazines. The gate was open, so he drove through and parked near the side entrance like the client had instructed. He grabbed his equipment from the truck bed and headed around back. The pool area was exactly what he'd expected. Pristine, oversized, infinity edge overlooking a canyon view that probably cost more than he'd make in 5 years. The water was crystal clear, which meant whoever had been maintaining it before knew what they were doing. This would be easy work. He set down his testing kit and was reaching for the skimmer when he heard the sliding glass door open behind him. "You must be Liam." He turned. The woman walking toward him was younger than he'd expected. Mid-20s, maybe, blonde hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. Barefoot. Wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweater that looked expensive in that deliberately casual way rich people managed. She was beautiful. Objectively, undeniably beautiful. But there was something in her face that looked wrong. Not physically, just empty. Like someone had scooped out whatever was supposed to be behind her eyes and left the rest intact. "That's me," he said, keeping his voice professional. "You must be Mrs. Bennett." "Arya," she corrected. "Just Arya is fine." "Arya," he repeated. "Nice to meet you. I'm just going to start with water testing, then skim and brush, check your filter system. Should take about an hour, hour and a half. I'll stay out of your way." She nodded, wrapping her arms around herself even though it wasn't cold. "Do you need anything? Water? I could bring you something." "I'm good, thanks. I've got everything I need in the truck." "Okay." She stood there for another moment, like she wasn't sure what to do with herself, then turned and walked back toward the house. He watched her go, then shook his head and got to work. He'd learned a long time ago not to get too curious about clients. Everyone had their own life, their own problems, their own weird situations. His job was to show up, do the work, get paid, and leave. Simple. Clean. No complications. The pool maintenance went smoothly. The chemical levels were slightly off, pH too high, chlorine a bit low, but nothing major. He made the adjustments, skimmed the surface, brushed the walls and steps, backwashed the filter. Standard procedure. He was almost finished when he noticed Arya had come back outside. She was sitting on one of the lounge chairs near the far end of the pool, knees pulled up to her chest, staring out at the canyon. He finished up, packed his equipment, and walked over to where she sat. "All set? Everything looks good. I adjusted the chemicals and left you a report card by the equipment. You're on the schedule for next Thursday, same time, unless that doesn't work for you." She looked up at him, and for just a second, something flickered in her expression. "Thursday's fine." "Great. I'll see you then." He turned to leave, but her voice stopped him. "Do you do this every day?" He glanced back. "Do what?" "Drive around, clean pools, move from house to house." "Pretty much," he said. "Monday through Saturday. Sometimes Sunday if someone has an emergency." "That sounds exhausting." He shrugged. "It's a living." She was quiet for a moment, still watching him with that strange, hollow look. "Do you like it?" It was an odd question, not the kind clients usually asked. "I don't know if 'like' is the right word," he said carefully. "But it's honest work, pays the bills, keeps my kid fed. That's enough." "You have a kid?" "A daughter, Sophie. She's 6. Something shifted in Arya's face, a softening, maybe, or just a different shade of sadness. "That's nice," she said quietly. "That you have someone." Liam didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded. "I should get going. Next appointment's in 20 minutes. "Right, of course." She stood up, brushing off her pants even though there was nothing on them. "Thank you. For the pool." "No problem. That's what you're paying me for." He walked back to his truck, loaded his equipment, and drove away. In his rearview mirror, he could see her still standing there by the pool, alone in that massive backyard, looking small despite all the space around her. The week passed in its usual blur. Wake up, coffee, appointments, lunch in the truck, more appointments, pick up Sophie from after-school care, dinner, homework, bedtime, repeat. It wasn't exciting, but it was stable, and stability was everything when you were doing this alone. Thursday came around, and he pulled up to the Bennett house just after 2, same as before. The gate was open again. He parked, grabbed his gear, headed around back. This time, Arya was already outside. She was sitting at a small patio table near the pool, a laptop open in front of her, but she didn't seem to be looking at it. When she heard him approach, she glanced up and offered a small smile. "Hey," she said. "Hey." He set down his equipment. "Okay if I get started?" "Of course." "Do your thing." He ran through the same routine. test, skim, brush, check the equipment. Everything was in decent shape. The chemical levels had held well from his adjustments the previous week. He worked efficiently, keeping his head down, staying focused. But he could feel her watching him. It wasn't creepy exactly, just present, like she'd positioned herself specifically to have a clear line of sight to where he was working. He tried to ignore it, but after about 20 minutes, she spoke up. "Can I ask you something?" He looked over. "Sure." "How long have you been doing this?" "Pool maintenance? About 6 years." "Did you always want to do this?" He almost laughed. "No, I wanted to be a lot of things when I was younger. This just ended up being what made sense." "What did you want to be?" He paused, brush in hand, dripping water onto the deck. This was getting personal, way more personal than client small talk usually went, but something in her face made him answer honestly. "A teacher, actually. History. I like the idea of helping kids understand how the world got to be the way it is." He shrugged. "But life happened. No degree, no money for school, and then Sophie came along. Plans change." Arya was quiet for a moment. "Do you regret it?" "Regret what? Not becoming a teacher?" "Yeah." He thought about it. "No, I don't think so. I mean, yeah, sometimes I wonder what that life would have looked like. But I've got Sophie. I've got work that's mine. That's more than a lot of people have." She nodded slowly, like she was trying to absorb that. "You're a good father. You don't even know me." "I can tell." There was something unsettling about the way she said it. Certain, absolute, like she'd already made up her mind about who he was based on almost nothing. He turned back to the pool, uneasy. "I should finish up," he said. "Right. Sorry, I'm talking too much." "It's fine." But it wasn't fine, and he knew it. Something about this felt off. Not dangerous. Just tilted. Like standing on a slope that wasn't quite steep enough to lose your balance, but steep enough that you had to pay attention. He finished the job in silence, packed up his gear, and left without saying much more than goodbye. As he drove away, he saw her in the rear-view mirror again, standing by the pool, watching him go. The next Thursday, she was outside before he even parked. She was wearing a sundress this time, white and simple, her hair down around her shoulders. She looked like she'd been waiting. He grabbed his equipment and walked over, keeping his expression neutral. "Morning," he said. "Morning. Everything okay with the pool?" "Perfect. You do good work." "Thanks." He started setting up, hoping she'd go back inside. She didn't. "Liam," she said, her voice quieter now. "Can I ask you something else?" He sighed, not unkindly. "Sure." "Do you ever feel invisible?" He stopped what he was doing and looked at her. "What do you mean?" "Like, you're going through your day, doing all the things you're supposed to do, checking all the boxes, but nobody actually sees you. They see the function you serve, but not you." He didn't answer right away, because, yeah, he knew exactly what she meant. Every single client he worked for saw him as the pool guy. Sophie's teachers saw him as a single dad who showed up late to pick up sometimes. The other parents at school events saw him as the one who didn't fit in. Nobody looked deeper than that. "Yeah," he said finally. "I know what you mean." She exhaled like she'd been holding her breath. "I thought you might." "Why are you asking me this, Arya?" She looked down at her hands. "Because I'm invisible too. In a different way, maybe. But I am. You live in a house that's worth more than most people see in a lifetime. You've got everything anyone could want." "No," she said softly. "I have things. That's different." He wanted to argue, but he couldn't. Because he could see it now. The loneliness that sat in her shoulders, the exhaustion in her eyes that had nothing to do with being tired. She was drowning in all that space and silence. "Where's your husband?" he asked. "New York. He's there most of the time. Business." "Does he know you're this lonely?" She smiled, and it was the saddest thing he'd seen in a long time. "He doesn't ask." Liam set down the test kit and straightened up. "Look, I'm sorry you're going through whatever you're going through. I really am. But I'm just the guy who cleans your pool. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a friend. I'm not whatever you're looking for." "I know that." "Do you?" She met his eyes, and there was something raw there now, something unguarded. I'm not trying to complicate your life, Liam. I'm just tired of pretending I'm not suffocating. He didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. He just went back to work, testing the water, making adjustments, doing the job he came here to do. Arya stayed outside, sitting in silence, and when he finished and packed up, she walked him to his truck. I'm sorry, she said as he loaded the last of his equipment. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. It's fine. It's not. I know it's not. She wrapped her arms around herself again. I just don't have anyone to talk to. That sounds pathetic, I know, but it's true. Liam looked at her, really looked at her, and saw someone who wasn't that different from him. Trapped in a life that looked right from the outside but felt wrong on the inside, going through motions, trying to survive. It's not pathetic, he said quietly. It's just lonely. She nodded, blinking hard. Yeah. He climbed into his truck, started the engine, and sat there for a second with the window down. Arya? She looked up. You're not invisible. Not to me. He drove away before she could respond, but in the mirror, he saw her standing in the driveway, one hand pressed to her mouth, and he knew he'd just crossed a line he hadn't meant to cross. He thought about skipping the next appointment, thought about calling her, saying he had to drop her account, that something had come up. But he didn't, because he needed the money, and because some part of him, some stupid reckless part, wanted to see her again. When he showed up the following Thursday, she was in the pool, not swimming, just standing in the shallow end, fully dressed in jeans and a t-shirt, water up to her waist. She was crying, not sobbing, not making noise, just silent tears running down her face while she stood there like she didn't know what else to do. Arya. His voice came out sharper than he meant it to. What the hell are you doing? She looked at him, and her eyes were red and swollen. I don't know. He dropped his equipment and walked to the edge of the pool. Get out of there. Why? Because you're scaring me. Get out. She didn't move, didn't. Do you know what it's like to live in a beautiful house and feel like you're dying inside it? Arya, do you know what it's like to have everything and feel nothing? Yes, he said, and his voice cracked. Yeah, I do. Now get out of the pool. She stared at him for a long moment, then slowly waded toward the steps. He grabbed a towel from one of the lounge chairs and handed it to her when she climbed out. She took it, but didn't use it, just stood there dripping onto the expensive tile. I'm sorry, she whispered. Stop apologizing. I don't know what I'm doing. I know. He took a breath, trying to steady himself. Look, I think maybe you need to talk to someone. A professional. This isn't something I can help with. I'm not asking you to fix me, Liam. Then what are you asking? She looked up at him, and her voice was so quiet he almost didn't hear it. I'm asking you to see me. And there it was. The thing that had been building for weeks, unspoken and dangerous. He saw her. He'd been seeing her, and she knew it. I have a daughter, he said, his voice rough. I have a life that I've built from nothing, and I can't screw it up. I can't. I know. Then you know this can't happen. What can't happen? Whatever this is. She stepped closer, and he could smell chlorine and something floral. Her shampoo, maybe, or perfume. I'm not asking for anything to happen. I'm just asking you not to leave. Every instinct he had told him to walk away. Get in the truck. Drive off. Drop the account. Protect himself and Sophie and the fragile stability he'd worked so hard to build. But he didn't move. Because he understood what she was really saying. She wasn't asking him to stay as a pool cleaner. She was asking him to stay as a person. As someone who saw her when no one else did. I'll stay, he said finally. But we're not doing this. Whatever you think this is, we're not doing it. She nodded, relief flooding her face. Okay. I mean it, Arya. I know. I understand. He wasn't sure she did. Hell, he wasn't sure he did. But he picked up his equipment and got to work anyway, and she sat on the lounge chair wrapped in the towel, watching him like he was the only solid thing in her entire world. And maybe he was. That night, Liam couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the afternoon in his head. Arya standing in the pool, water darkening her clothes, tears streaming down her face like she'd finally stopped pretending everything was fine. The way she'd looked at him when she climbed out, the way his hands had shaken when he handed her that towel. He rolled onto his side and checked his phone. 1:17 in the morning. He had to be up in 3 hours. Sophie had a field trip tomorrow. Today, technically. And he'd promised to pack her a special lunch. He couldn't afford to be exhausted. But his brain wouldn't shut off. The smart thing would be to drop the Bennett account. Call her in the morning, professional and polite. Say he was overbooked and couldn't continue service. Refer her to someone else. Clean break. She'd understand. Or she wouldn't. Either way, it would be done. Except he knew he wasn't going to do that. He grabbed his phone and opened his banking app, scrolling through the numbers like he did every night before bed. Checking account? $847. Savings? $1,203. Rent was due in 6 days. Sophie needed new shoes. Her toes were starting to press against the front of her sneakers. The truck needed an oil change he'd been putting off for 2 weeks. The Bennett account paid $120 a week. That was $480 a month. He couldn't afford to walk away from $480 a month because he was feeling uncomfortable. He set the phone down and closed his eyes. It would be fine. He'd keep things professional, maintain boundaries, do the job, get paid. That was it. He almost believed it. The next Thursday, he showed up at the Bennett house with his jaw set and his mind made up. Professional, distant, no more personal conversations, no more letting her pull him into whatever was happening in her head. But when he came around the side of the house, Arya wasn't outside. The pool area was empty, the water still and perfect in the afternoon light. He felt a weird twist of relief and disappointment in his chest, then shook it off and got to work. He was halfway through testing the chemical levels when he heard the sliding door open. He didn't look up. "Hey," she said. "Hey. I wasn't sure you'd come back." "I said I would." She walked over slowly, stopping a few feet away. She was wearing shorts and a tank top, her hair pulled back, sunglasses hiding her eyes. "I'm sorry about last week." "You already apologized." "I know, but I mean it. I put you in a weird position. That wasn't fair." He finished writing down the pH reading and straightened up. "It's fine. Let's just move forward." "Okay." She paused. "Can I ask you something?" "Arya?" "Not something personal, I promise." He sighed. "What?" "Do you ever take breaks, like during the day? Do you ever just stop and breathe?" He looked at her confused. "I eat lunch in my truck between appointments. That count?" "That's not a break. That's refueling." "What's the difference?" She tilted her head, and even though he couldn't see her eyes through the sunglasses, he could feel her studying him. "A break is when you actually let yourself exist for a minute, not as a worker or a parent or whatever role you're playing, just as you." "I don't have time for that." "I know. That's the problem." He didn't know what to say to that, so he turned back to the pool and started skimming leaves off the surface. She stood there watching him for another minute, then disappeared back into the house. He told himself he was relieved. He finished the maintenance in 45 minutes, his fastest time yet at this property, and was packing up his equipment when Arya came back outside carrying 2 glasses of iced tea. She set one down on the table near his testing kit. "You don't have to drink it," she said, "but it's there if you want it." He stared at the glass. Condensation was already forming on the outside. The ice clinked softly. It looked good, really good, and his mouth was dry from working in the heat. "Thanks," he said, and took a drink. It was perfect. Not too sweet, just cold enough. Arya sat down at the patio table and sipped her own glass. "Can I tell you something?" "Do I have a choice?" She smiled a little. "You always have a choice, Liam. That's the whole point." He sat down across from her, mostly because his legs were tired and he had 3 more appointments after this. "What do you want to tell me?" "I've been thinking about what you said, about feeling invisible." "Okay." "And I realized something. I made myself invisible, on purpose, because it was easier than being seen and having people look right through me anyway." Liam turned the glass in his hands, watching the ice shift. "What changed?" "You did." "Arya, I'm not trying to make this into something it's not," she said quickly. "I know you have boundaries. I know you have a life. I'm not asking you to save me or fix me or be anything other than what you are. But you looked at me like I was real, not like I was a decoration in an expensive house, and I forgot what that felt like. He took another drink of tea, buying himself time. Your husband should be the one looking at you like that. Yeah, he should. She said it without bitterness, just flat acceptance. But he doesn't. And I don't think he ever did. Then why stay? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Where would I go? I don't have a job. I don't have skills. I have a sociology degree I've never used and a closet full of clothes I didn't pay for. This is my life. This is what I chose. You could choose something else. Could I? She looked at him, and this time she took off the sunglasses. Her eyes were tired. You ever feel like you made one decision a long time ago, and now you're just living with the consequences forever? Yeah. He knew that feeling. He'd felt it the day Sophie's mother walked out. The day he realized he was doing this alone, the day he gave up on every dream he'd ever had because the reality in front of him demanded all his attention. Every day, he said. They sat in silence for a while. The canyon stretched out behind them, vast and empty. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk circled. I like these conversations, Arya said quietly. I know I probably shouldn't. I know it's not professional, but I do. Me too. The admission surprised him. But it was true. These Thursday afternoons had become something he looked forward to, even when he knew he shouldn't. There was something about the way she listened, the way she asked questions that made him think about things he usually kept buried. It was dangerous, but it was also the most honest thing in his week. So what do we do? She asked. We keep it like this. I do my job. We talk. That's it. That's it? That's all it can be. She nodded slowly. Okay. He finished the tea, stood up, and grabbed his equipment. I'll see you next week. Liam? He turned back. Thank you, she said. For not running away. He didn't trust himself to respond, so he just nodded and left. Over the next few weeks, a routine developed. He'd show up every Thursday at 2. She'd be outside, sometimes reading, sometimes just sitting. He'd work on the pool while they talked. Small things at first, favorite books, worst jobs they'd ever had, memories from childhood. Nothing too deep, nothing that crossed any lines. But the conversation started lasting longer. What used to be 10-minute exchanges turned into 20, then 30. He found himself working slower, stretching out the maintenance so he'd have a reason to stay. She started asking about Sophie, what she liked, what she was learning in school, what it was like raising a kid alone. He showed her pictures on his phone. Arya would smile at them, really smile, and say things like, she looks exactly like you, or she's lucky to have you. One Thursday in late July, he showed up and found Arya sitting by the pool with her laptop open, frowning at the screen. Everything okay? He asked. She glanced up. I'm trying to figure out what I want to do with my life. Turns out that's harder than I thought. What brought this on? You did. He set down his equipment. How did I do that? You made me realize I'm wasting my time, just existing, not living. She closed the laptop and looked at him. I've been thinking about going back to school, maybe getting a master's degree, actually using the education I already have. That's great. Is it? Or is it just another distraction? Does it matter? At least you're doing something. She considered that. I guess that's true. It's just scary, starting over, admitting that the last 5 years were basically a waste. They weren't a waste if you learned something from them. What did I learn? How to be lonely in expensive surroundings? You learned what you don't want. That's worth something. She smiled. You always do that. Do what? Find the useful part, the part worth keeping. He shrugged. It's a survival skill. They were quiet for a moment, and then Arya said, Can I ask you something personal? You always do. Sophie's mother, what happened? He tensed. This was territory he didn't usually venture into, but something about the way Arya asked, gentle, genuinely curious, not prying, made him answer. She left when Sophie was 3. Just packed a bag one morning and said she couldn't do it anymore. The kid, the responsibility, all of it. She needed to find herself or whatever. He picked up the test kit, needing something to do with his hands. I haven't heard from her since. That must have been devastating. For Sophie, yeah. For me? He paused. Honestly, part of me was relieved. We weren't good together. We were just two people who made a mistake and tried to make it work. It was exhausting. Do you think she regrets it, leaving? I don't know. I hope so, for Sophie's sake, but I stopped wondering about it a long time ago. Arya was quiet, absorbing that. Then she said, "You're a better person than I am." Why do you say that? Because I would have spent years wondering, years holding on to the anger. Oh, I was angry. I was furious, but anger doesn't pay the rent, so I let it go. How? He looked at her. I decided Sophie deserved a father who was present, not one stuck in the past. So that's what I became. She stared at him like he'd just said something profound, but all he'd done was tell the truth. He got to work on the pool, and she sat there watching him, her expression unreadable. When he finished and started packing up, she walked over to where he stood by his truck. Liam? Yeah? Do you ever think about what your life would look like if you'd made different choices? Sometimes. Late at night when I can't sleep. But it doesn't change anything. Doesn't it make you sad? Thinking about all the things you gave up? He thought about that. Really thought about it. No, he said finally, because the things I gave up weren't real. They were just ideas. Sophie is real. This life is real. That's enough. Arya looked like she wanted to say something else, but she just nodded. See you next week. See you next week. He drove away, and in the mirror, he saw her standing in the driveway with her arms wrapped around herself, looking more alone than anyone should ever look. The following week, something shifted. He noticed it the second he pulled up to the house. Arya's car, a silver Mercedes he'd seen parked in the garage, was gone. In its place sat a black Range Rover with New York plates. Her husband was home. Liam sat in his truck for a moment, debating whether to leave. But he had a job to do, and backing out now would be weird. So he grabbed his equipment and headed around back. The pool area was empty. He got to work quickly, keeping his head down, trying to be invisible. He was almost done when he heard voices inside the house. A man's voice, sharp and irritated. Arya's voice, quieter, placating. The sliding door opened. A man stepped out, tall, mid-40s, wearing a suit despite the heat. He had the kind of face that was used to getting what it wanted. He looked at Liam like he was trying to remember if he'd given permission for someone to be there. "You the pool guy?" he asked. "Yes, sir. Liam Carter. I'm just finishing up." The man nodded, already losing interest. "Arya said the water's been looking good. Keep it up." "Will do." The man turned to go back inside, then paused. "How long you been doing this?" 6 years. "And before that?" Liam straightened up. "Before that, I was figuring out how to be a single parent." The man's expression didn't change. "Right. Well, good work." He disappeared back into the house. Liam finished as fast as he could and got out of there. Arya never came outside. He told himself he was glad. When he showed up the next Thursday, the Range Rover was gone. Arya was sitting by the pool in a sundress, her eyes hidden behind sunglasses again. "Hey," he said carefully. "Hey. Your husband go back to New York?" "Yeah, this morning." He set down his equipment and started testing the water. She didn't say anything else, which was unusual. Normally, by now, she'd be asking him questions, pulling him into conversation. But today she just sat there, silent and still. After about 10 minutes, he couldn't take it anymore. "You okay?" "Fine." "You don't seem fine." She took off the sunglasses, and he saw the truth immediately. She'd been crying. Her eyes were red-rimmed, puffy. "What happened?" he asked. "Nothing. Everything. I don't know." She stood up and walked to the edge of the pool, staring down at the water. "He was here for 2 days." 2 days. And the whole time it was like I wasn't even in the room. He talked on the phone, worked on his laptop, went to meetings. I could have been a piece of furniture for all he noticed. "Did you talk to him about it?" "What would I say?" "Hey, remember me? Your wife? The person you married?" He'd just look at me like I was being dramatic. Liam set down the test kit and walked over to stand next to her. "Arya, you can't live like this." "I know. So do something about it." "Like what?" "Leave." She turned to look at him, and her eyes were full of fear. "And go where?" "Do what?" "Anything. Something. You're smart. You're capable. You could build a whole new life if you wanted to." "You make it sound so easy." It's not easy. It's terrifying. But it's better than this. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "What if I'm not strong enough?" "You are." "How do you know?" "Because you're still here. You're still standing. That takes strength." A tear slid down her cheek and she wiped it away quickly. "He asked about you." Liam's stomach dropped. "What?" "My husband. He asked how long I'd been using you for pool maintenance, if I was happy with the service." "What did you say?" "I said you were professional and thorough, and I had no complaints." She looked at him. He didn't ask anything else, but the way he said it, I don't know, it felt like he was testing me. "Testing you how?" "Like he knew. Or suspected. I don't know. Maybe I'm being paranoid." Liam took a step back, his heart pounding. "Arya, if he thinks something's going on, nothing is going on." "I know that. But if he doesn't, what are you saying? That you want to stop coming here?" "I'm saying we need to be careful." She looked at him, and something broke in her expression. "This is the only thing in my life that feels real, Liam. The only thing. Please don't take it away." "I'm not trying to take anything away. I'm trying to protect both of us." "From what? We're not doing anything wrong. Aren't we?" The question hung in the air between them, because he was right, and they both knew it. They weren't doing anything wrong in the technical sense. But there was something happening between them, something quiet and powerful and completely inappropriate. They were teetering on the edge of something that could destroy both their lives. "I should go," he said. "Liam, I'll see you next week." He grabbed his equipment and left before she could say anything else. His hands were shaking as he loaded everything into the truck. This was getting out of control. He needed to end it, drop the account, walk away. But he knew he wouldn't. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of tension. Every Thursday, he'd show up and they'd dance around what they both knew was happening. The conversations got deeper, more honest, more dangerous. She told him about her childhood, growing up in a middle-class family, watching her parents' marriage slowly disintegrate, swearing she'd never end up like her mother. He told her about his own family, his father who drank too much, his mother who worked 3 jobs and still couldn't make ends meet, the way he'd promised himself his kid would have better. They talked about dreams they'd abandoned, fears they'd never spoken aloud, the ways they'd both settled for lives that looked acceptable from the outside but felt hollow on the inside. And every week, the space between them got smaller. One Thursday in late August, he showed up and found her in the pool again. But this time she was swimming, actually swimming, cutting through the water with smooth, powerful strokes. He stood there watching her for a moment, struck by how different she looked. Not drowning, not desperate, just moving. She reached the far end, touched the wall, and looked up to see him standing there. She smiled. "Hey," she called out. "Hey!" She swam over to the steps and climbed out, water streaming off her. She was wearing a black one-piece swimsuit, simple and elegant. She grabbed a towel and wrapped it around herself. "I've been swimming every day this week," she said. "It helps. Clears my head." "That's good." "I've also been looking at graduate programs, social work. I think I could be good at that." "I think you could too." She walked closer, and he could smell chlorine and sunscreen. "I want to thank you." "For what?" "For reminding me I'm capable of more than this." "You did that yourself." "No, I didn't. I was drowning, Liam, literally and figuratively, and you threw me a rope." "Arya, I know we can't be anything more than this. I know you have lines you won't cross. I respect that, but I need you to know that these conversations, they've saved me." He didn't know what to say, so he just stood there, looking at her, feeling the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on both of them. And then she did something that changed everything. She stepped closer, close enough that he could feel the heat coming off her skin, close enough that he could see the water droplets still clinging to her shoulders, close enough that every alarm in his head started screaming. "Arya," he said, his voice rough. "Don't." "Don't what?" "Don't make this harder than it already is." "What if I want it to be hard? What if I'm tired of easy?" "You don't know what you're saying." "Yes, I do." She looked up at him, and her eyes were clear and certain. "I know exactly what I'm saying. I see you, Liam, and I think you see me, and I don't want to pretend anymore that this is just about pool maintenance." He took a step back, trying to create distance, trying to think. "I have a daughter." "I know." I have a life I can't afford to mess up. I know that too. Then you know I can't do this. I'm not asking you to do anything. I'm just asking you to be honest, with me and with yourself. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. Because she was right. He'd been lying to himself for weeks, pretending this was just friendly conversation, just two lonely people passing time. But it was more than that. It had been more than that for a while now. I need to go, he said. Okay. He turned to leave, but her voice stopped him. Liam? He looked back. I'm not sorry, she said, for any of this. Even if nothing ever happens, I'm not sorry. He drove away with his hands gripping the steering wheel so tight his knuckles went white. When he got home, Sophie was sitting at the kitchen table doing homework. She looked up and smiled. Hi, Daddy. Hey, baby. How was work? Fine. Just fine. She went back to her homework, and he stood there watching her, reminding himself why none of this could happen, why he had to walk away, why restraint mattered more than desire. But when Thursday came around again, he was back at the Bennett house, right on schedule, telling himself this would be the last time. It wasn't. September came in hot and dry, the kind of heat that made the air shimmer above the pavement and turned every surface into something that could burn you if you weren't careful. Liam kept showing up every Thursday, kept telling himself each visit would be the last, and kept coming back anyway. The pattern had become almost ritualistic. He'd arrive at 2, Arya would be waiting, they'd talk while he worked, and then he'd leave before anything could shift from words into action. But the tension was building. He could feel it every time their hands accidentally brushed when she handed him a glass of water. Every time their eyes met and held a second too long. Every time the silence between sentences stretched out and filled with everything they weren't saying. The Thursday after Labor Day, he pulled up to the house and immediately knew something was different. There was a car he didn't recognize parked in the driveway, a white Lexus with a Canyon Heights Country Club sticker on the rear window. He almost turned around and left, but he'd already committed to the appointment, and backing out now would raise questions. He grabbed his equipment and headed around back, moving quietly. Through the windows, he could see Arya inside talking to another woman, older, perfectly dressed, the kind of person who looked like she spent more on her haircut than Liam made in a week. Probably a friend, or a neighbor. He'd do his work quickly and get out. He was testing the pH levels when the sliding door opened and both women stepped outside. Arya's face went tight when she saw him, a flash of something that looked like panic crossing her features before she smoothed it away. Liam, this is Claire Hutchinson. She lives 3 houses down. The older woman looked him over with the kind of assessment that made him feel like he was being priced out. The pool service, she said. It wasn't a question. Yes, ma'am. How long have you been servicing this property? About 3 months now. And before that? Who was maintaining it? Liam glanced at Arya, who was standing very still, her arms crossed over her chest. I'm not sure, he said. The client just requested weekly service starting in June. Claire turned to Arya. Robert Tillman used to handle all the pools in this neighborhood. He retired last spring. Most of us switched to Morrison Pool Service. They're very reliable. I'm sure they are, Arya said, her voice carefully neutral. But I'm happy with Liam's work. Of course. Claire smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I'm just surprised I haven't seen his truck here before. I'm usually very aware of who's coming and going, especially on our street. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Liam kept his face blank and went back to testing the water, trying to become invisible. He could feel Claire watching him, cataloging details, making assessments. Well, Claire said finally, I should get going. Richard will be home soon and I haven't even thought about dinner. Arya, we should have lunch next week, catch up properly. That would be lovely. Claire headed back through the house and Liam heard the front door close a minute later. Arya waited until the sound of the Lexus pulling away faded before she walked over to where he was working. I'm sorry about that, she said quietly. About what? She's just a neighbor. She's not just anything. She's the nosiest person in this entire neighborhood. If there's gossip, she knows it. If there's a scandal, she's already told half the community before lunch. Liam set down the test kit. Did I do something wrong? No, you didn't do anything. It's just... She ran a hand through her hair, frustrated. She was asking questions. About how often you're here, whether we talk. She made some comment about how unusual it is for service people to stay so long. His stomach went cold. How long does she think I stay? She said she's driven past a few times around 3:30, and your truck was still here. He checked his watch. It was 2:45 then. On a normal day, he'd be here until at least 3:15, sometimes later if they got talking. He'd never thought about how it looked from the outside, never considered that someone might be paying attention. I should start coming at different times, he said. Mix up the schedule. Or maybe we should... Don't say it. She closed her mouth, but he could see the words in her eyes anyway. Maybe we should stop. Maybe this is getting too complicated. Maybe we're being reckless. I'll be faster, he said. In and out. No conversations. Liam, it's the smart thing to do, Arya. You know it is. She looked like she wanted to argue, but she just nodded. Okay. He finished the maintenance in record time, 35 minutes flat, and packed up without another word. As he drove away, he saw a curtain move in one of the houses down the street. Someone watching. Someone always watching. That night he lay in bed staring at his phone. He'd drafted a text to Arya 3 times and deleted it 3 times. Finally, around midnight, he just wrote, "We need to be more careful." Her response came 2 minutes later. "I know." He stared at those 2 words for a long time before setting the phone down and trying to sleep. It didn't come easy. The next Thursday, he showed up at 1:30 instead of 2. Arya wasn't outside. He did the maintenance in 40 minutes, left the report card by the equipment panel, and got back in his truck. He was pulling out of the driveway when his phone buzzed. It was a text from Arya. "Did you already come and go?" He typed back, "Yeah, trying to vary the schedule." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, "Can we talk?" "Not today, but soon?" He shouldn't. He knew he shouldn't, but he wrote back when. "Saturday? My husband's in New York until Monday. We could meet somewhere. Not here." Every rational part of his brain screamed that this was a terrible idea. Meeting her somewhere outside of work, outside of the safe context of pool maintenance, would cross a line they'd managed to avoid crossing. But his fingers typed the response before his brain could stop them. Where? She sent him an address. A coffee shop in a neighborhood halfway between Canyon Heights and his apartment. Neutral territory. Public. Safe. 2 o'clock? She added. Okay. He spent the next 2 days trying to talk himself out of it. Friday night, after he put Sophie to bed, he sat at his kitchen table with a beer he wasn't drinking and a piece of paper where he'd written out all the reasons this was a mistake. The list filled half the page. On the other side, he'd written only one thing. But I want to see her. That was the problem. He wanted to see her. Not as the pool guy. Not in her backyard with equipment and chemicals. Just as himself. As Liam. And he wanted her to see him the same way. Saturday afternoon, he dropped Sophie off at his sister's place for a play date with her cousins. His sister Rebecca gave him a long look when he said he had some errands to run. Errands, she repeated. On a Saturday afternoon, when you could be spending time with your daughter. I spend every minute I'm not working with Sophie, you know that. I do know that. Which is why I'm wondering what's suddenly so important that you need me to watch her. Can you just... He stopped himself, took a breath. Can you please just watch her for a couple hours? I'll be back by 5. Rebecca's expression softened. You okay, Liam? I'm fine. You don't look fine. You look stressed. I'm always stressed. That's called being a single parent. This is different. She studied his face. Is there someone? What? No, there's no one. Liam, I just need a couple hours, Becca. That's all. She didn't look convinced, but she nodded. Okay, but if you need to talk... I know, thanks. He drove to the coffee shop and got there 10 minutes early. It was one of those trendy places with exposed brick and mismatched furniture, the kind of spot where everyone was either working on a laptop or having an intense conversation over fair trade espresso. He ordered a black coffee and sat at a table near the window where he could watch the door. Arya walked in at exactly 2 o'clock. She was wearing jeans and a simple white t-shirt, her hair down, minimal makeup. She looked younger like this, more real, She spotted him and smiled, and something in his chest twisted painfully. She ordered something complicated at the counter, then came and sat across from him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "This is weird, right?" she said finally. "Yeah, really weird. I've never seen you anywhere except my backyard. I've never seen you in jeans." She laughed a little. "I own jeans. I even wear them sometimes." Could have fooled me. The barista called out her drink, some kind of latte with oat milk and vanilla, and she went to grab it. When she came back, she wrapped both hands around the cup like she needed something to hold on to. "I wasn't sure you'd actually come," she said. "I wasn't sure I would either." "But you did." "Yeah, I did." She took a sip of her drink, and he noticed her hands were shaking slightly. She was nervous. That made him feel slightly better, knowing he wasn't the only one who felt like they were doing something dangerous. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "That's usually my line." "What are we doing, Liam?" There it was, the question he'd been avoiding for weeks. He looked down at his coffee, watching the steam rise off the surface. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Do you think about me? When you're not at my house?" He met her eyes. "Yes." "How often?" "Too often." She exhaled slowly. "Okay, good. I thought maybe I was imagining it." "You're not imagining it. So what do we do about it?" "Nothing. We do nothing, because doing something would be wrong," she finished. "Complicated, destructive. Pick your word." "What if I don't care?" "You should care. You have a husband. I have a daughter. Neither of us can afford to blow up our lives." She was quiet for a long moment, staring into her latte. "What if my life is already blown up? What if I'm just going through the motions, pretending everything's fine when it's not? Then fix it. Leave him. Get a divorce. Build something new. And then what? Wait a respectful amount of time and see if you're still interested? Arya, I'm not being naive, Liam. I know how this works. I know the timing is terrible. I know we met under the worst possible circumstances. But that doesn't change the fact that when I'm with you, I feel more alive than I have in years." He wanted to say he felt the same way. He wanted to tell her that their Thursday conversations had become the highlight of his week, that he thought about her when he was lying in bed at night, that the sound of her laugh made him feel something he thought he'd lost the capacity to feel. But saying those things would make them real, would make this thing between them into something that demanded action instead of something they could keep suspended in possibility. "We can't do this," he said instead. "I know." "Then why are we here?" "Because I needed to know I wasn't crazy. I needed to know you felt it too." "I feel it," he admitted, "but feeling it doesn't change anything." She reached across the table and put her hand over his. It was the first time they'd touched on purpose, deliberately, and the contact sent electricity up his arm. He should have pulled away. He didn't. "What if we just had this?" she said. "Just these conversations, nothing more. Just two people who see each other, talking." "We already have that." "Not really. At my house, you're the pool guy. I'm the client. There's always that barrier. What if we just took that away? Met like this sometimes, as ourselves?" "That's still crossing a line." "Is it? We're in a public coffee shop. We're talking. We're not doing anything wrong." "You know it's more than that." "Maybe. But maybe it doesn't have to be." He looked down at her hand on his. Small, pale, no wedding ring. He'd noticed weeks ago that she never wore her ring when she knew he was coming over. "Where's your ring, Wasas?" he asked. She pulled her hand back, caught. "I took it off." "Why?" "Because wearing it while I was meeting you felt like lying." "But you are lying. To your husband, to yourself." "I know." She looked miserable. "I know I am, but I can't seem to stop." He finished his coffee in one long swallow, needing the caffeine, needing the distraction. "This is a bad idea." "Probably. We should stop before it gets worse. Okay? I'm serious, Arya. I know you are." She stood up, grabbed her latte. "I should go." He stood too. They walked out of the coffee shop together, stopping on the sidewalk. She turned to face him, and the afternoon sun caught her hair, turning it almost gold. For what it's worth, she said, I think you're the best person I've ever met. You don't know me that well. I know you well enough. She started to walk away and he grabbed her arm without thinking. She turned back, surprised. This doesn't mean I don't care, he said. About you. About what you're going through. I do. But I can't be the answer to whatever you're looking for. I'm not looking for you to be the answer. I'm just looking for you to be honest. I am being honest. Then tell me the truth. If things were different, if I wasn't married, if you didn't have so much at stake, would you want this? He should have lied, should have said no, should have created distance, should have protected them both. But he was tired of lying, tired of pretending. Yes, he said. I would. She smiled, sad and beautiful. That's all I needed to know. She walked to her car, and he stood there on the sidewalk watching her drive away, feeling like he'd just made either the biggest mistake of his life or the most honest choice he'd made in years. He couldn't tell which. Over the next 2 weeks, they fell into a new pattern. He'd maintain the pool on Thursdays, quick and efficient, barely any conversation. But then on Saturdays, they'd meet at the coffee shop. Just for an hour, just to talk. They never touched again after that first time. Never crossed any physical lines. But the emotional intimacy grew deeper with every conversation. She told him about her marriage, how she'd met her husband at a college party, how he'd seemed sophisticated and successful and everything she thought she wanted, how the first year had been good, but then he'd gotten busier, more distant, more focused on work than on her, how she'd slowly disappeared into the background of his life until she wasn't sure she existed anymore except as decoration. He told her about Sophie's mother, how they'd been young and stupid and thought a baby would fix what was broken between them, how it had only made things harder, how some nights he still woke up in a panic, terrified he was failing his daughter, terrified he wasn't enough. They talked about books and music and all the small things that made them who they were. She loved classical music and hiking and old black and white movies. He loved jazz and history podcasts and cooking elaborate meals even though he rarely had time to do it. They discovered they'd both read the same novel in high school and hated it for the same reasons. That they both thought cilantro tasted like soap. That they both had recurring dreams about showing up somewhere important and realizing they were unprepared. The conversations were easy in a way nothing else in Liam's life was easy. With Arya, he didn't have to perform or pretend or be anything other than himself, and she seemed to feel the same way. But the strain was starting to show. One Thursday in late September, he showed up at the house and found Arya's husband's Range Rover in the driveway again. His gut clenched. He should have turned around, but he'd already committed to the appointment, and canceling now would look suspicious. He went around back and got to work, moving fast, keeping his eyes down. He was almost done when the sliding door opened and Arya's husband stepped out. This time, he wasn't alone. Another man was with him, younger, maybe mid-30s, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Liam's truck. David, this is our pool service, Arya's husband said, gesturing vaguely in Liam's direction. Liam something. Carter, Liam said. The other man, David, barely glanced at him. You said you wanted to show me the canyon view. Right, this way. They walked to the far end of the pool deck, talking about property values and investment opportunities, completely ignoring Liam's presence. He finished up quickly and was packing his equipment when Arya came outside. She looked pale, tense. All set? She asked, her voice carefully professional. Yeah, everything's balanced. Great, thank you. He could see the strain in her face, the way she was holding herself too rigidly. Something was wrong, but he couldn't ask. Not with her husband 20 feet away, so he just nodded and left. That Saturday, she didn't show up at the coffee shop. He waited for 30 minutes, checking his phone, wondering if she'd sent a message he'd missed. Nothing. He finally texted her. Everything okay? The response took 10 minutes. Can't make it today. Sorry. He stared at those words, trying to read between them. Was she backing out? Had something happened? He typed several responses and deleted them all. Finally, he just wrote, "Let me know if you need anything." She didn't respond. The following Thursday, her husband's Range Rover was still in the driveway. Liam almost didn't stop. But if he skipped the appointment without notice, it would raise red flags. So he pulled in, grabbed his equipment, went through the motions. Arya came outside while he was working. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. "Hey," she said quietly. "Hey, I'm sorry about Saturday." "It's fine." "It's not. I wanted to be there, but Richard decided to extend his stay. He's been home all week." Liam glanced toward the house. "Is he here now?" "No, he's at a business lunch, but he'll be back soon." "Then I should hurry." She moved closer, lowering her voice. "We need to talk." "Not here. Not now." "When then?" "I don't know, Arya. This is getting too complicated." "I know it is, but—" The sound of a car pulling into the driveway cut her off. They both tensed. Liam went back to testing the water, trying to look like he'd been focused on work this whole time. Arya walked toward the house, her posture shifting into something more formal. But it wasn't her husband. It was Claire Hutchinson, the nosy neighbor. She parked and got out of her car, waving cheerfully at Arya. "I hope I'm not interrupting," Claire called out. "I was just in the neighborhood and thought I'd drop off that recipe I mentioned." "Of course, come in." Claire walked toward the house, but not before giving Liam a long, assessing look. He kept his head down, but he could feel her cataloging every detail. How close he'd been standing to Arya. How quickly they'd separated when the car pulled up. The way Arya's face was flushed. He finished as fast as he could and got out of there. But as he drove away, he saw Claire standing at the window watching him leave. That night, Arya texted him. "Claire asked how long you usually stay. She said she's noticed your truck here quite a bit. I think we have a problem." He stared at the message, his heart pounding. This was exactly what he'd been afraid of. The scrutiny, the suspicion, the way small-town minds turned innocent interactions into scandals. He typed back, "We need to stop meeting. All of it. The coffee shop, the extra conversation. Everything." Her response was immediate. "No." "Arya, be reasonable." "I am being reasonable. I'm saying I'm not willing to let Claire Hutchinson's nosiness dictate my life. This isn't about her. It's about protecting both of us." "From what? We're not doing anything wrong. You know how this looks. I don't care how it looks. You should care. Your husband already suspects something. If the neighbors start talking, then let them talk." He called her. She answered on the first ring. "Are you out of your mind?" he said, keeping his voice low even though Sophie was asleep in the next room. "Maybe," Arya said. "Probably. But I'm tired of being afraid. Being afraid is what keeps us safe." "Safe from what, Liam? We're not having an affair. We're not doing anything except talking." "You really think your husband's going to see it that way?" She was quiet for a moment. "No, probably not." "Then you know what we have to do." "I can't lose this." Her voice cracked. "I can't lose you. You don't have me. You never did." "That's not true. Arya, don't say we have to stop, please. I can't hear that right now." He closed his eyes, leaning back against his kitchen counter. "What do you want me to say?" "I want you to tell me there's a way through this. Some way we can keep talking without destroying everything." "I don't think there is." "Then we'll make one." "How?" "I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out." She hung up before he could respond. He stood there in his dark kitchen, phone in hand, feeling like he was standing at the edge of a cliff with no good options. Jump or step back. Both felt impossible. The next Thursday, he showed up at the Bennett house to find the gate closed. There was a note taped to it. "Service canceled until further notice. We'll contact you to reschedule." He sat in his truck staring at that note for a full minute. Then he drove away, telling himself this was for the best. This was the clean break they both needed. His phone rang 30 seconds later. "Arya." "Don't come to the house anymore," she said without preamble. "Richard's suspicious. Claire's been asking questions. It's not safe." "Okay, but I need to see you." "Arya, please, one more time, just to talk, to figure out what we're doing." He should have said no, should have ended it right there. But he didn't. "Where?" he asked. "There's a park near the canyon, Ridgeview Trail. Do you know it?" "Yeah." "Tomorrow, 5 o'clock. There's a bench at the overlook." "Arya, this is—" "I know what it is. I'll be there. Please come." She hung up before he could answer. He drove home, parked, and sat in his truck for 20 minutes trying to decide what to do. Every logical part of his brain said stay away. But the part that had spent the last 3 months getting to know her, caring about her, seeing her as more than just another client, That part was already planning what he'd say when he showed up tomorrow, because he was going to show up. They both knew it. The next afternoon, Liam picked Sophie up from school and took her to get ice cream even though it was a Friday, and they usually save treats for weekends. She noticed immediately. "Are we celebrating something?" she asked, sitting across from him at the small table with a cup of strawberry ice cream that was already melting in the heat. "No, just felt like ice cream." She studied him with those dark eyes that saw too much for a 6-year-old. "You seem sad, Daddy." "I'm not sad, baby. Just tired." "You're always tired. That's what happens when you're a grown-up." She took another bite, swinging her legs under the table. "Miss Rachel says when people are sad, they should talk about their feelings." "Miss Rachel is very smart." "So are you sad?" He looked at his daughter, the small person who depended on him for everything, who trusted him completely, who had no idea how close he was to making a decision that could change both their lives. "Maybe a little," he admitted. "Why?" "Sometimes grown-up stuff is complicated." "What kind of stuff?" "Just work things. Nothing you need to worry about." She seemed satisfied with that answer and went back to her ice cream. Liam checked his watch. 4:15. He had 45 minutes before he was supposed to meet Arya at the Overlook. His sister was expecting Sophie at 4:30 for another sleepover. He told Rebecca he had a late appointment that might run long. Another lie in a growing pile of them. They finished their ice cream and drove to Rebecca's house. Sophie grabbed her overnight bag from the back seat and kissed him goodbye. "Love you, Daddy." "Love you too, baby. Be good for Aunt Becca." Rebecca walked Sophie inside, then came back out to where Liam was still sitting in his truck with the engine running. "You okay?" she asked through the open window. "Why does everyone keep asking me that?" "Because you look like you're about to do something stupid." He almost laughed. "What makes you think that?" "I've known you your whole life, Liam. I know what you look like when you're wrestling with something, and right now you look like you're losing." "I'm fine, just got a lot on my mind." "Does it have anything to do with whoever you've been meeting on Saturday afternoons?" His hands tightened on the steering wheel. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you don't. Just be careful, okay? Whatever this is, be careful. You've got more to lose than just yourself." "I know that." "Do you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're forgetting." He wanted to argue, but she was right. He was forgetting. Or maybe he was just choosing to ignore what he knew because the alternative felt impossible. "I should go," he said. "Liam, I'll pick Sophie up tomorrow morning. Thanks for watching her." He drove away before Rebecca could say anything else. The whole drive to Ridgeview Trail, he kept thinking he should turn around. Cancel. Send Arya a text saying he couldn't make it. End this before it went any further. But he didn't. He parked in the small lot at the trailhead and walked the quarter-mile to the Overlook. The sun was starting to drop toward the horizon, turning the sky orange and pink. The canyon stretched out below, vast and empty and beautiful. Arya was already there, sitting on the bench, staring out at the view. She turned when she heard his footsteps. "You came." "I said I would." "I wasn't sure you meant it." He sat down next to her, leaving space between them. "We shouldn't be here." "I know." "Then why are we?" She turned to face him fully. "Because I needed to see you, really see you, not as the pool guy, not in some coffee shop where we're pretending this is casual, just you and me being honest about what this is." "And what is this, Arya?" "I don't know, but it's something, and I'm tired of pretending it's not." He looked out at the canyon, the fading light making everything look softer than it was. "Your husband suspects." "Yes." "And you're still here." "Yes." "You understand what that means, right? What you're risking." "I understand exactly what I'm risking. My marriage, such as it is, my comfortable life, my reputation, all of it. And I'm here anyway." "Why?" She took a breath. "Because for the first time in 5 years, I feel like I'm actually alive. Like I'm not just going through the motions, playing a part I never auditioned for. And I know that's not fair to put on you. I know this isn't your responsibility, but I can't make it stop." "What can't you make stop?" "This." She gestured between them. "Whatever this is. The way I think about you all the time. The way every conversation we have feels more real than anything else in my life. The way I—" She stopped, closed her eyes. "I'm falling for you, Liam, and I know I shouldn't, I know the timing is terrible and the circumstances are impossible, but I am. He felt like someone had punched him in the chest. Because he'd known it, somewhere deep down, but hearing her say it out loud made it real in a way it hadn't been before. You can't, he said. I know. I can't give you what you're looking for. I'm not asking you to give me anything. I'm just telling you the truth. The truth doesn't change our situation. Doesn't it? She looked at him, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. Don't you feel it too? He wanted to lie. Wanted to tell her no. This was all in her head. She'd misread everything. But he was so tired of lying. Yes, he said. I feel it. She exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for weeks. Then what do we do? Nothing. We do nothing. You go home to your husband. I go home to my daughter. We stop this before it destroys both of us. Is that really what you want? What I want doesn't matter. What matters is what's right. And what's right is walking away. Pretending we never met? Going back to our separate lives like none of this happened? Yes, that's exactly what's right. She stood up, pacing to the edge of the overlook, her silhouette dark against the fading sky. I can't do that. You have to. Why? Because it's complicated? Because people will judge us? Because Claire Hutchinson might gossip at the country club? Because I have a 6-year-old daughter who depends on me? Because you have a husband you made vows to? Because there are consequences to our actions that go beyond just us? I know that. Don't you think I know that? I lie awake every night thinking about it, about how selfish I'm being, about how wrong this is, but I can't make myself care enough to stop. Then I'll stop for both of us. She spun around. You don't get to make that decision alone. Yes, I do, because I'm the one with the most to lose. If this gets out, you lose a marriage that's already broken. I lose my daughter's respect, her trust, her entire world. I won't do that to her. I would never ask you to. You're asking right now, by being here, by telling me you're falling for me. You're asking me to choose. Arya walked back to the bench and sat down heavily, like her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. You're right. You're absolutely right. I'm being selfish and reckless, and I'm not thinking about anyone but myself. I didn't say that, but it's true. She wiped her eyes. I've been living in this fantasy where somehow we could make this work, where somehow the universe would align and give us a chance. But that's not how life works, is it? No, it's not. They sat in silence for a long time, watching the sun sink lower. Finally, Arya spoke again, her voice quiet. Can I ask you one more thing, and then I promise I'll let this go? What? If things were different, if we'd met at a different time in a different way, do you think we could have had something real? He looked at her, really looked at her, at the way the dying light caught in her hair, at the sadness in her eyes that matched his own, at everything she was and everything she could have been to him in another life. Yeah, he said, I think we could have had something really good. She smiled through her tears. That's all I needed to hear. She stood up, and he stood with her. They walked back toward the parking lot in silence. When they reached her car, she turned to face him one last time. I'm going to file for divorce, she said. Arya, not for you, for me. You were right when you said I should leave. I should have left years ago. This marriage has been over for a long time. I was just too scared to admit it. What will you do? I don't know. Figure it out as I go, I guess. Maybe actually use that sociology degree. Maybe go back to school. Maybe just find an apartment and a job and start over from scratch. You're stronger than you think. I hope so. She pulled out her keys, then paused. Will I see you again? I don't think that's a good idea. Not even as friends? Especially not as friends. She nodded, accepting it. Okay, then I guess this is goodbye. Yeah, I guess it is. She got in her car and he watched her drive away, the taillights disappearing around a curve. He stood there in the empty parking lot as the last light faded from the sky, feeling like he'd just lost something he never actually had. The drive home was a blur. He picked up Sophie the next morning like nothing had happened. She chattered about her sleepover with her cousins, about the movie they'd watched, about the pancakes Aunt Becca had made for breakfast. He listened and nodded and made all the right responses while his mind replayed the conversation at the Overlook on an endless loop. Days turned into weeks. He kept working, kept showing up to appointments, kept going through the motions of his normal life. But something felt different now, like a light had gone out somewhere inside him. He thought about Arya constantly, wondered if she'd actually filed for divorce, wondered if she was okay, wondered if she thought about him too. 3 weeks after their meeting at the Overlook, he got a text from an unknown number. "I did it. Filed yesterday. Wanted you to know. I hope you and Sophie are well. A." He stared at that message for 10 minutes before typing back, "Proud of you. Take care of yourself." Her response came immediately, "You too." That was the last time they communicated. October passed, then November. The holidays came and went. Liam threw himself into being the best father he could be, spending every free moment with Sophie. They went to the zoo, made cookies, watched every animated movie she wanted to see. He was present in a way he hadn't been in months, and she blossomed under the attention. One Saturday in early December, he took Sophie to the park near their apartment. She was on the swings, laughing, asking him to push her higher. He obliged, watching her soar against the clear winter sky, feeling something like peace for the first time since summer. "Higher, Daddy. Any higher and you'll fly away." "That's okay, you'll catch me." He would, he always would. That was his job, his purpose. Everything else was just noise. On the other side of the park, he saw a woman walking alone. Blonde hair, about the right height. His heart jumped before his brain caught up and told him it wasn't her. It was never her. She was somewhere else, building a new life. And he was here, living the one he'd chosen. That night, after he put Sophie to bed, he sat on his apartment balcony with a beer and let himself think about Arya for the first time in weeks. He wondered if she'd found an apartment, if she was working, if she was happy, if she ever thought about those Thursday afternoons when they'd talked about everything and nothing while he pretended to focus on pool chemicals. He hoped she was okay, hoped she'd found whatever she'd been looking for, hoped she didn't regret walking away from her comfortable life. And he hoped she understood why he'd made the choice he did, why restraint mattered more than desire, why some things, no matter how much you wanted them, had to stay in the realm of possibility rather than reality. His phone buzzed, a text from Rebecca. "How are you doing?" "Really?" He thought about lying, about saying he was fine, but he was tired of lying. "Better than I was, still figuring it out." "Proud of you, little brother. Whatever you went through, you did the right thing." "How do you know?" "Because you're still here, still showing up, that's how I know." He set the phone down and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, in some parallel universe, he and Arya had met at the right time, had built something real, had gotten their chance, but not in this one. In this one, he was a single father who cleaned pools and loved his daughter and made the hard choices because that's what being a grown-up meant. And if there was loneliness in that, if there was regret, if there was a small ache that never quite went away, well, that was the price of doing the right thing. He could live with that. In mid-December, he got a Christmas card in the mail. No return address. Inside was a simple note written in handwriting he recognized. "Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for the conversations. Thank you for being exactly who you are. You'll never know how much it meant. I'm doing okay. I hope you are too. Wishing you and Sophie all the happiness. A." He read it 3 times, then put it in his dresser drawer under some old t-shirts where Sophie would never find it. A small piece of a story that almost happened. A reminder that sometimes the right choice and the easy choice were 2 very different things. That night, Sophie asked him to read her an extra bedtime story. He said yes, and then another when she asked again, and then another after that. They fell asleep together in her small bed, her stuffed elephant tucked between them, and when he woke up at 3 in the morning with a crick in his neck, he carefully extracted himself and went to his own room. He pulled out his phone and looked at Arya's last message. "You too." 2 words. That's all they'd ever be to each other now. 2 words and a stack of memories and the knowledge that they'd both been brave enough to walk away. He deleted the message thread. All of it. Every conversation that they'd had outside of work-related text. It was time to let go completely. But he kept the Christmas card. January brought new clients and new routines. He started going to a gym near his apartment, working out early in the mornings before Sophie woke up. It helped clear his head, gave him something to focus on besides the endless loop of what-ifs that still occasionally kept him awake at night. One Thursday in late January, almost exactly 7 months after he'd first met Arya, he got a call from a potential new client. A woman with a pleasant voice who'd gotten his number from a neighbor. She had a pool in Canyon Heights that needed weekly maintenance. Could he start next week? Canyon Heights, he repeated, his stomach dropping. Yes. Is that a problem? No, not a problem. What's the address? She gave it to him. He checked his mental map of the neighborhood. 3 streets away from the Bennett house. Close. Too close. But far enough that he'd probably never run into Arya. Probably. I can start next Thursday, he said. 2 o'clock work for you? Perfect. Thank you so much. He hung up and sat in his truck for a minute, weighing his options. He could turn down the job, find a reason, make an excuse, or he could take it and prove to himself that he'd really moved on, that he could go back to that neighborhood and do his work without falling apart. He took the job. The following Thursday, he drove through Canyon Heights with his hands steady on the wheel and his mind clear. He passed the street where Arya's house was. Didn't look down it. Didn't slow down. Just kept driving to his appointment. The new client was friendly but distant, exactly how client relationships should be. He did the work, left the report card, got paid. Simple. Clean. No complications. On his way out of the neighborhood, he allowed himself one glance down Arya's street. The gate to her property was closed. There was no car in the driveway that he could see. The house looked empty. She was gone. Really gone. And he was still here, still doing his job, still living his life. It was enough. It had to be enough. February came in cold and gray. Sophie turned 7, and Liam threw her a birthday party at the apartment with 6 of her school friends. They played games and ate too much cake and made a mess he spent 2 hours cleaning up afterward. It was chaos. It was exhausting. It was perfect. That night, after all the guests had gone home and Sophie was asleep with a belly full of cake, he sat on the balcony again and let himself think about Arya one last time. He hoped she was somewhere warm, somewhere safe, somewhere she felt seen. And then he let her go. Really, truly let her go, because that was the thing about restraint. It didn't just mean walking away. It meant staying away. It meant choosing every single day to focus on what you had instead of what you'd lost. It meant finding peace in the choices you'd made, even when they hurt. He went back inside, checked on Sophie one more time, and went to bed. Tomorrow, he'd wake up at 4:30, make coffee, go to work, pick up Sophie, make dinner, help with homework, read bedtime stories. And somewhere in all of that routine, in all that predictable normalcy, he'd find meaning. Not because it was exciting or dramatic or the stuff of fairy tales, but because it was real. And real was enough. March arrived with unexpected rain, the kind that turned the canyon dirt into mud and made the pools he serviced look darker than usual. Liam had settled into a rhythm that felt almost normal. Work. Sophie. Sleep. Repeat. The ache had dulled to something manageable, something he could carry without it weighing him down every minute of every day. He was finishing up at a client's house in Pasadena when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Liam Carter? Yeah, this is Liam. This is Patricia Morris from Morrison Pool Service. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time. He straightened up, confused. Morrison was the big company that serviced most of Canyon Heights, the one Claire Hutchinson had mentioned all those months ago. No, you're fine. What can I do for you? Actually, I'm calling to see what we can do for you. We're expanding our team and looking for experienced technicians. Your name came up through several client referrals. Would you be interested in discussing a position? Liam sat down on the edge of the pool deck. I'm sorry, what? Client referrals? Yes. We had 3 separate homeowners in the Canyon Heights area. Mention your work specifically when we were doing our quarterly check-ins. Said you were thorough, professional, reliable. One even said she was disappointed she couldn't keep you because you were overbooked. He knew immediately which client that was. Even now, even after everything, she was still looking out for him. I appreciate the offer, he said carefully, but I run my own operation. I'm not really looking to work for someone else. I understand, but I should mention the benefits. Health insurance, retirement plan, steady salary plus commission. And we're specifically interested in someone who could eventually manage our Canyon Heights division. It would mean more money and more stability. More stability. That word hit him hard. Because stability was everything when you were raising a kid alone, when you were one emergency away from disaster. Can I think about it? Of course. Take your time. I'll email you the details. If you're interested, we can set up a meeting. Thank you. I'll be in touch. He hung up and stared at his phone. 3 referrals, 1 from Arya, he was certain, but who were the other 2? He scrolled through his Canyon Heights clients mentally. Mrs. Chen, maybe. She always said nice things about his work. And possibly the Martins, who'd referred him to 2 of their neighbors already. Or maybe all 3 referrals were from Arya, using different names. Making sure he'd be taken care of, even if she couldn't be the one to do it. The thought made his chest tight. That night, after Sophie went to bed, he looked at the email from Morrison Pool Service. The salary was nearly double what he was making on his own. The benefits were real, and the position would mean consistent hours, which would mean more time with Sophie. It was a good opportunity. Maybe too good to pass up, but taking it would mean going back to Canyon Heights regularly, working in that neighborhood, maybe even servicing properties on the same streets he used to avoid. He'd have to be okay with the possibility of running into Arya, of seeing her with someone new, of watching her build a life that didn't include him. He typed out a response to Patricia Morris, then deleted it, typed it again, deleted it again. Finally, he wrote, "Thank you for the opportunity. I'd like to schedule a meeting to discuss the details." He hit send before he could change his mind. The meeting was set for the following Tuesday. Liam dropped Sophie at school and drove to Morrison's main office in Burbank. Patricia Morris turned out to be a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She walked him through the position, the expectations, the growth potential. "We need someone who can build relationships with clients," she said. "Someone they trust. From what I've heard, that's your strength." "I just do the work and treat people with respect. Nothing fancy." "That's exactly what we need. Too many technicians these days think the job is just about chemicals and equipment, but it's about people. You seem to understand that." He thought about all the conversations he'd had poolside over the years. Mrs. Pacheco and her lemonade, the Chens asking about Sophie's school, and Arya looking at him like he was the only person who'd ever really seen her. "Yeah," he said, "I get that." "Good. When can you start?" "I need to give my current clients notice, at least 2 weeks. Some of them I've been servicing for years." "That's fine, that's professional. We can work with that timeline." They shook hands, and Liam walked out of the office feeling like he'd just stepped into a new chapter. It was terrifying and exciting, and maybe a little bit necessary. Over the next 2 weeks, he called each of his current clients to let them know he was transitioning to Morrison. Most were understanding, a few were disappointed. Mrs. Pacheco cried, which made him feel terrible, but she said she was happy he was moving up in the world. "You deserve good things, mijo," she said. "You work so hard. You're such a good father. Good things should come to you." He thanked her and promised he'd stop by sometime to say hello. He meant it. His last day as an independent operator was a Thursday in late March. By strange coincidence, his final appointment was at the Bennett house. The new owners had hired him a month ago, completely unaware of the history. When he pulled up to the gate, now painted a different color, he felt the weight of everything that had happened here. A young couple met him at the door. They were friendly, enthusiastic about their new home, full of plans for renovations. They had no idea that 6 months ago, a woman had stood in this very pool crying, that 2 people had talked for hours on that deck about loneliness and possibility and all the things they couldn't have. He did the maintenance one last time, leaving everything balanced and clean. As he packed up his equipment, the wife came out with a check. "We're so sorry you're leaving," she said, "but we're excited for you. New job, right?" "Yeah. Working for Morrison now." "Well, they're lucky to have you. You've been great." He thanked her and left, driving away from the Bennett house for the last time. In the rearview mirror, it looked like any other house. No ghosts, no memories, just a building. Maybe that's all it had ever been. He started at Morrison the following Monday. The work was familiar, but the structure was different. He had a schedule that someone else created, a route that was optimized for efficiency. a uniform with the company logo. It felt strange at first, like wearing someone else's clothes, but the paychecks were consistent. The benefits were real. And when Sophie asked if they could afford to go to Disneyland for her birthday next year, he could actually say maybe instead of no. 2 months into the new job, he was assigned to cover for a technician who'd called in sick. The address was in Canyon Heights. Of course it was. He'd been lucky so far, mostly working in other neighborhoods, but he'd known eventually this would happen. He pulled up to the house and checked the service notes. The client's name was Davis. No mention of anyone he knew. He grabbed his equipment and headed to the backyard. A woman in her 60s was sitting on the patio reading a book. She looked up when he approached. "You must be from Morrison. Thank you for coming on such short notice." "No problem. I'm Liam. I'll be handling the service today." "Wonderful. The pool's been looking a bit cloudy. I think the filter might need attention." He got to work, and she went back to her book. It was a normal, unremarkable appointment. He was finishing up when she spoke again. "You know, you remind me of someone." He looked over. "Yeah?" "A young man who used to service one of my neighbor's pools. Very professional, very kind. I always thought he had a good heart." Liam's stomach dropped. "Your neighbor?" "Aria Bennett. Well, she's not Bennett anymore. She went back to her maiden name after the divorce. Cooper, I think. Or was it Collins? I can never remember." "Is she still in the neighborhood?" "Oh no, she moved months ago, right after everything was finalized. I heard she got a small apartment in Silver Lake and went back to school. Social work, I think someone said." The woman smiled. "Good for her. That marriage was never right. Anyone with eyes could see that." Liam focused very hard on coiling his hose. "Is that so?" "Oh yes. Her husband was barely home, and when he was, they seemed like strangers. Very sad." She paused. "There was some gossip, you know, about her and the pool service man, but I never believed it." "No?" "No, I saw them together once, actually. I was walking my dog past her house, and they were talking by the pool. And you know what I noticed? They weren't touching. They weren't even standing that close. They were just talking, like two lonely people who found someone who understood them." She looked at Liam directly. "I don't think that's a scandal. I think that's just human." He didn't trust himself to respond. He finished packing up his equipment in silence. "Are you all right, dear?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am. Just a long day." "I'm sure it is. Well, thank you for your work. The pool looks much better already." He drove away from that house with his hands shaking. Aria was in Silver Lake, had gone back to school, was building a new life, exactly like she'd said she would. And somewhere in the middle of that new life, she wasn't thinking about him. She'd moved on, which is exactly what he wanted, what he needed, what made all of this bearable. So why did it hurt so much? That night, he almost looked her up, almost typed her name into social media to see if she had any public profiles. Almost let himself fall back into the orbit of wondering and wanting and what-ifs. But he didn't, because he'd made a choice, and that choice didn't have an expiration date. It wasn't something you committed to only when it was easy. It was something you lived with every single day, even when it ached. Spring turned to summer. Sophie finished first grade at the top of her class. Liam got a raise and a commendation from Morrison for client satisfaction scores. He started dating someone he met at Sophie's school, another single parent, a woman named Jessica, whose son was in Sophie's class. It was nice, comfortable, uncomplicated. It wasn't what he'd had with Aria, but maybe that was the point. Maybe what he'd had with Aria was never meant to be replicated. Maybe it was meant to be a moment in time, a chapter that taught him something and then closed. In August, almost exactly a year after he'd last seen Aria at the Overlook, Liam took Sophie to the beach. They built sand castles and chased waves and ate overpriced ice cream that dripped down their hands. She was laughing, completely present, completely happy. "This is the best day ever," she said, sandy and sticky and perfect. "Yeah?" "Yeah, I love spending time with you, Daddy." "I love spending time with you too, baby." She went back to her sandcastle, and Liam sat there watching her, feeling something settle in his chest. This was his life. This moment. This child. This love that asked for nothing but presence and showed up every single day with absolute trust. It was more than enough. It was everything. On the drive home, Sophie fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from sun and salt water. Liam drove slowly, taking the long way, not ready for the day to end. As he merged onto the highway, a car pulled up next to him in the adjacent lane. He glanced over out of habit and froze. It was her. Arya, driving a small Honda, her hair shorter than he remembered, wearing glasses he'd never seen her in. She was singing along to something on the radio, completely absorbed, completely unaware of him. She looked different, lighter somehow, like she'd shed a weight she'd been carrying for years. He should have looked away, should have sped up or slowed down, broken the parallel moment before she noticed him. But he couldn't move. He just stared, drinking in the sight of her, this woman who'd changed everything without meaning to. And then she glanced over. Their eyes met. For 3 seconds, maybe 4, they looked at each other across 2 lanes of highway traffic. Her face registered shock, then recognition, then something that looked like joy and sadness mixed together. He saw her mouth form his name even though he couldn't hear it, and then traffic shifted. She moved into the exit lane. He stayed on the highway, and just like that, she was gone, swallowed up by the flow of cars heading in a different direction. Liam's heart was pounding. His hands gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. In the back seat, Sophie stirred but didn't wake up. He kept driving, didn't take the exit, didn't turn around. Just kept going forward, toward home, toward the life he'd built, toward the future he'd chosen. But the image of her face stayed with him, the way she'd looked at him, the way she'd smiled even as her eyes filled with tears. The recognition that they'd both made it through to the other side, separately, but somehow still connected by the weight of what they'd shared. That night after he put Sophie to bed, he sat on his balcony and let himself feel everything he'd been holding back. The loss, the longing, the rightness of the choice and the pain of living with it. He didn't cry. He just sat there, breathing, existing, letting it all wash over him and then recede like waves. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I saw you today. You looked good. Happy. I'm glad. I hope Sophie is well. I hope life is treating you kindly. Thank you for everything you gave me. I'm doing okay now. Really okay. I wanted you to know that. Take care of yourself, Liam Carter. You deserve every good thing. A. He read it 5 times. Then he typed a response. I'm glad you're okay. Really glad. You deserve good things too. All of them. Take care of yourself, Arya. Be happy. He hit send and then after a moment's hesitation, deleted her number from his phone. Not out of anger, not out of hurt, just as a final act of letting go. Her response came 30 seconds later. I will. You too. And that was it. The real ending. Not dramatic or explosive. Just 2 people acknowledging what they'd meant to each other and then choosing to keep walking in opposite directions. Liam set his phone down and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, Arya was looking at the same sky, building her new life, finding her way, being brave enough to start over. And here he was, doing the same thing in his own way, raising his daughter, working his job, showing up every day and choosing presence over regret. There was dignity in that, in restraint, in knowing when to walk away and when to stay. In understanding that love didn't always mean possession. Sometimes it just meant seeing someone clearly, honoring what you felt, and then letting them go because holding on would destroy what made it beautiful in the first place. September came, and with it, Sophie's 8th birthday. Liam threw another party, this one at a park with a dozen kids and way too much cake. Jessica helped him organize it, and her son and Sophie ran around like they'd been friends forever. It was chaotic and loud and normal. After all the guests left, Sophie climbed into his lap and rested her head against his chest. This was the best birthday ever, Daddy. Better than last year? Way better, because you were here the whole time, not on your phone or worried about work. Just here. He kissed the top of her head. I'm always here, baby. I know. That's why you're the best dad in the world. She fell asleep right there in his arms, and he sat holding her as the sun set, feeling the weight of her trust and love and absolute certainty that he would always show up. And he would. That was the promise he'd made to her from the day she was born. The promise that mattered more than any other. The promise that had guided every choice he'd made, including the hardest one. In October, he got promoted to regional supervisor at Morrison. It meant more responsibility, but also more flexibility. He could make his own schedule, spend more time with Sophie, build the kind of life he'd always wanted for both of them. Jessica asked him one night if he'd ever been in love before. They were sitting on her couch after the kids had gone to bed, drinking wine, having one of those conversations that happen when people are trying to figure out if they're building towards something serious. "Yeah," he said, "once." "What happened?" "Wrong time. Wrong circumstances. We both walked away." "Do you regret it?" He thought about that, really thought about it. "No, I made the right choice. It just wasn't an easy one." "Would you do it differently if you could go back?" "No," he said, and he meant it. "I wouldn't change anything. Because changing it would have meant being someone he wasn't. Someone who chose desire over responsibility. Someone who broke promises and took shortcuts and justified selfishness with romance. And he wasn't that person. Had never been that person. Never would be." Jessica nodded, seeming to understand. "I think that's brave. Choosing the hard right thing over the easy wrong thing. I don't know about brave, just necessary. Same thing sometimes." Maybe she was right. In December, exactly 2 years after Arya had sent him the Christmas card, another one arrived. Same handwriting, different message. "I heard about your promotion. Congratulations. You've always deserved recognition for how hard you work. I'm finishing my master's this spring, social work, specializing in family counseling. Life is good. Different, but good. I think about you sometimes, about how you showed me it was possible to choose yourself, to walk away from what's familiar and build something better. That was the greatest gift anyone ever gave me. I hope you're happy, Liam. I hope Sophie is thriving. I hope you found what you were looking for. Merry Christmas." A. He read it twice, then put it in the drawer with the first one. Small pieces of a story that would always matter, but would never be revisited. He wrote back on a plain card, keeping it simple. "Congratulations on finishing your degree. I'm proud of you. Sophie's doing great, smart, kind, everything I could hope for. I'm happy. Really happy. I hope you are too. Thanks for the memories and the lessons. Take care of yourself. L." He mailed it to the return address on her card. An apartment in Silver Lake, just like the neighbor had said. And then he let it go. Again. Finally. New Year's Eve he spent with Sophie and Jessica and her son. They watched the ball drop on TV and made too much noise with party horns and stayed up way too late. At midnight, Jessica kissed him, and Sophie made a disgusted face, and everyone laughed. It was normal, uncomplicated, real, and it was enough. Spring arrived with the kind of weather that made California worth all its flaws. Warm days, cool nights, everything blooming. Liam took Sophie hiking in the canyon. Not the overlook where he'd met Arya that last time, but a different trail. They talked about school and friends and all the small things that filled her world. "Daddy?" she asked as they sat on a rock eating sandwiches. "Do you ever wish things were different?" "Different how?" "I don't know. Like, do you wish Mom was here? Or that you had a different job? Or lived somewhere else?" He looked at his daughter, this incredible person who existed because of choices he'd made, good and bad. "No, baby, I don't wish for different. This life, right here, with you, it's exactly where I'm supposed to be. Even though it's hard sometimes, especially because it's hard sometimes. The hard things are what make us stronger." She thought about that, swinging her legs off the edge of the rock. "I'm glad you're my dad. I'm glad you're my kid." They finished their hike and drove home as the sun was setting. On the radio, a song came on that made him think of Arya. He didn't change the station, just let it play. Let himself remember for 3 minutes and 42 seconds. And then he let it go. Because that was the thing about restraint. It wasn't about never feeling. It was about feeling everything and then choosing what you did with those feelings. It was about honoring the past without living in it. It was about acknowledging loss without letting it define you. It was about being strong enough to walk away and wise enough to know when walking away was the bravest thing you could do. That summer, Liam turned 34. Jessica threw him a surprise party that wasn't really a surprise because Sophie couldn't keep a secret. All his friends were there, Rebecca and her family, people from work, Sophie's friends and their parents. It was loud and messy and full of laughter. Standing in the middle of it all, holding a beer, watching Sophie play with her friends, Liam felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Complete. Not because his life was perfect. It wasn't. There were still bills to worry about and decisions to make and challenges around every corner, but he was present for all of it, showing up every day, choosing responsibility over escape, building something real with people who mattered. And somewhere across the city, he hoped Arya was feeling the same thing. Hoped she'd found her own version of this. Hoped she was complete too, in her own way. They would probably never see each other again, never have another conversation, never know how the other's story continued beyond this point. And that was okay, because what they'd shared hadn't been about possession or permanence. It had been about recognition, about two people seeing each other clearly in a moment when they both needed to be seen, about giving each other permission to want more from life than what they'd settled for. That was the gift. Not the relationship that never happened, but the courage to choose themselves, to walk away from what was comfortable but hollow, to build something better, even if they had to build it separately. As the party wound down and people started leaving, Sophie came over and hugged him.
"This was a good party, Daddy." "Yeah, it was." "Are you happy?" "Yeah, baby. I really am." And he meant it. Every word. Years would pass. Sophie would grow up. Liam would build his career, maybe marry Jessica, maybe not. Life would continue in all its messy, unpredictable glory. And through all of it, he would carry the memory of one summer when a lonely woman in a big house had taught him that sometimes the most loving thing you could do was let someone go. He never forgot the lesson, never forgot the conversations, never forgot the weight of choosing right over easy. And he never regretted it, because in the end, restraint wasn't about denying yourself. It was about knowing yourself well enough to understand what you could afford to lose and what you couldn't. Liam had made his choice. He'd chosen his daughter, his integrity, his future. And in doing so, he'd given Arya the space to choose herself. That was love too. A different kind. The kind that didn't make for fairy tales, but made for real life. The kind that hurt and healed in equal measure. The kind you could live with. The kind that lasted.